Susan Miller stood at the window of Mission Control, watching the strange ship hover above the landing pad. Its surface gleamed like oil on water, shifting colors under the morning sun. After years of signals and messages, the aliens had finally arrived. "They're coming out," Frank Daniels said, his voice tight. The former Marine kept his hand near his hip, where a pistol would normally be. Today he was unarmed, by order of the United Nations Security Council. A seam appeared in the side of the craft. Light spilled out, and then figures emerged. 3 tall, slender beings with skin the color of jade and large, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Susan took a deep breath. As the head linguist for the first contact team, she had spent months studying the language samples the aliens had sent. Now it was time to put that knowledge to use. "Remember," she told the assembled team, "they call themselves the Viridians. They're just one species in something called the Galactic Concord." The room was silent as the aliens were escorted inside by security personnel. Susan noticed how the guards towered over the visitors. The tallest Viridian barely reached a human's shoulder, and their limbs were thin, almost fragile-looking. The lead alien stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Zextral of the Viridian Collective," it said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "We bring greetings from 27 civilizations." Susan stepped forward and replied in the alien language, carefully forming the musical tones. The ambassador's large eyes widened slightly. "You speak our words well," Zextral said, switching to English. "Your species learns quickly." Over the next 3 hours, the humans and aliens exchanged information. The Viridians explained that the Galactic Concord had been watching Earth for decades. Now that humans had developed faster-than-light communication, first contact was permitted under Concord law. "We invite Earth to send representatives to Nexus Station," Zextral announced. "There you will meet other species and begin the process of joining the galactic community." Later, as the diplomatic team reviewed recordings of the meeting, Susan noticed something odd. "Did you see how they reacted when Pete dropped his datapad?" she asked Frank, who was rewatching the footage with narrowed eyes. On screen, one of the guards had bent quickly to pick up a fallen object. All 3 aliens had flinched backward, their thin bodies tensing. "They're afraid of sudden movements," Frank said. "And did you notice their surprise when we mentioned our work shifts? 12 hours seemed to shock them." Dr. Alan Ward, the team's biologist, nodded thoughtfully. "Their muscle density appears much lower than ours. I guess their homeworld has lower gravity. And their reaction to our atmosphere suggests they find it oxygen-rich, almost intoxicating." "So what are you saying?" asked Lisa Brown, the intelligence officer who had been quietly taking notes. "I'm saying," Frank replied, "that physically, we might be much stronger than they expected. These aren't the advanced super beings we imagined. They're just different." 1 month later, the Earth ship U.S. Intrepid broke orbit, carrying Susan, Frank, and 30 other selected representatives toward Nexus Station. As the blue planet shrank behind them, Susan felt a mix of excitement and unease. "You still worried?" Frank asked, joining her at the viewport. Susan nodded. "Something about the way the ambassador watched us. Like we were fascinating but dangerous." "Maybe we are," Frank said quietly. "Think about it. We evolved on a world they probably consider harsh. We're stronger, faster, and more durable than they appear to be. What if we're the scary aliens in this story?" Susan had no answer. As the ship accelerated toward its first jump point, Earth vanished from view, and humanity took its first real step into a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. Nexus Station looked like a giant metal flower floating in space. Susan pressed her face to the viewport as the Intrepid approached the massive structure. Hundreds of ships moved around it like bees around a hive. "It's huge," she whispered. Frank nodded. "And we're probably the first humans to ever see it." The docking process took 2 hours. When the airlock finally opened, the Earth delegation was met by a group of aliens. Susan recognized the Viridians, but there were other species too. Some with feathers, others with scales, one that seemed to float rather than walk. "Welcome to Nexus," said a bird-like creature with blue-green plumage. "I am Kalir of the Avari. I will be your guide." The gravity on the station felt light to the humans. Susan found herself taking careful steps to avoid bouncing. The air smelled strange, clean but with unfamiliar scents. "We have prepared living quarters for you," Kalir said, leading them down wide corridors. "We hope they will be comfortable." Susan noticed the other aliens watching them. Some seemed curious, others wary. She heard whispers and clicks as they passed. Later, in a private meeting room, Dr. Ward shared his findings with the human team. "I've reviewed the station's environmental data," he said. "The gravity here is set at what they consider standard, about 70% of Earth's. The oxygen levels are lower too." Lisa frowned. "Is that why they all seem so delicate?" "Exactly," Ward replied. "Most species evolved on worlds with lower gravity than Earth. Their muscles and bones are adapted to those conditions." Frank paced the room, something that seemed to make the alien observers nervous. "So we're naturally stronger just by existing?" "Yes," Ward said. "And there's more. According to their medical files, we have greater endurance too. What we consider a normal 8-hour workday would exhaust most Concord species." Susan remembered how the aliens had scheduled their meetings with frequent rest breaks. "They don't know what we're capable of." That evening, Kalir took Susan to an observation deck. Stars filled the view, more than she had ever seen from Earth. "Your people are not what we expected," Kalir admitted, his feathers ruffling slightly. "What do you mean?" Susan asked. Kalir's bird-like head tilted. "In galactic terms, Earth is what we call a death world. A planet so harsh that sentient life should not have evolved there." "A death world," Susan repeated. "High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous predators," Kalir explained. "Most species in the Concord come from gentler places. They are concerned about what kind of people such a world would produce." Susan looked out at the stars. "They're afraid of us, aren't they?" "Some are," Kalir said quietly. "Some are very afraid indeed." 6 months passed on Nexus Station. The humans learned about alien cultures while teaching about Earth. Susan became fluent in 4 alien languages. Frank studied their technology. Most days were peaceful. Then the emergency call came. Susan was in a meeting with Viridian diplomats when Frank burst in. His face was tight with worry. "We just got a distress signal from the colony ship Dakota," he said. "They went silent mid-transmission." The Dakota carried 500 human settlers to a new planet. It was 3 days from Nexus by fast ship. Ambassador Zex Troll raised a slender hand. "The Concord has protocols for such matters. We will form a committee to—" "People could be dying," Frank interrupted. "We don't have time for committees." The ambassador's skin changed from green to pale blue. "It is not the Concord way to rush into danger." Susan watched Frank's jaw clench. She knew that look. 2 hours later, Frank led a small team aboard a borrowed shuttle. Susan went as translator. Pete Johnson, their security specialist, brought weapons despite Concord rules against them. A Viridian observer named Vril Exad joined them, carrying recording equipment. "I must document this mission," he explained. The Dakota floated silently in space. Its engines were dark. No lights shone from its windows. "Life support is still working," Susan said, checking the sensors. "There are people alive in there." When they docked and entered the ship, they found destruction. Walls were torn, equipment was broken, blood stained the floors. "What happened here?" Susan whispered. "They found survivors hiding in a storage room. A woman named Karen told them about the attack. They came aboard saying they were traitors," she said, her voice shaking. "But they were slavers. Krell, they called themselves. They took half our people." The Krell were not part of the Concord. They were raiders from the edges of known space. Taller and stronger than Viridians, They were still no match for humans. Frank organized a plan. They would use the shuttle to follow the Krell ship's radiation trail. Pete would lead the rescue. Vril watched them with wide eyes. You intend to attack the Krell vessel? Just the three of you. 4 of us, Susan corrected, checking the small laser pistol Frank had given her. The Viridian's skin paled further. This is madness. The Krell are feared throughout the sector. Pete grinned as he loaded his weapon. They haven't met humans yet. They found the Krell ship hiding in an asteroid field. Using the shuttle's small size to their advantage, they docked without being detected. Susan noticed that Vril kept his recorder aimed at them, not at the surroundings. She had a sudden feeling that the Concorde was more interested in studying humans than helping them. Frank seemed to sense it too. Stay behind us, he told the Viridian, and keep recording. The galaxy should see what happens when someone takes what belongs to Earth. The inside of the Krell ship was dark and hot. Susan, Frank, and Pete moved quietly through narrow corridors. Vril followed, recording everything. They found the human captives in a large hold. 20 colonists sat in metal cages, including children. Armed Krell guards patrolled nearby. The Krell were tall, gray-skinned aliens with 4 arms. They carried energy weapons and wore light armor. To most species in the galaxy, they looked terrifying. Pete studied them through a small opening. 6 guards, armed but not very alert. Frank nodded. We need a distraction. Susan pointed to a control panel. I could trigger their alarm system. While Frank and Pete prepared, Vril moved closer to Susan. You cannot win against 6 Krell warriors, he whispered. It is impossible. Susan gave him a strange look. Watch us. When the alarm blared, 2 Krell ran to check the system. Pete was waiting. He grabbed the first one and slammed it against the wall. The alien crumpled instantly. The second Krell fired its weapon, but Pete was already moving. He dodged the shot and struck the Krell in the center of its chest. The alien dropped. 2 down, Pete said calmly. The remaining guards rushed toward the noise. Frank met them in the corridor. His movements were quick and precise. Each blow he landed seemed to shock the Krell. They weren't used to enemies who could match their strength. Susan watched Vril reaction. The Viridian was trembling, his skin almost white with fear, but his recorder never stopped. Is this typical human combat ability? He asked, his voice barely audible over the sounds of fighting. Pete was a boxing champion before joining security, Susan replied. But most healthy humans could handle themselves against these guys. In less than 5 minutes, all 6 Krell were unconscious or dead. Pete had a small cut on his arm. Frank's knuckles were bloody. Neither seemed concerned by their injuries. They freed the colonists quickly. As they led the people back to their shuttle, more Krell appeared at the far end of a corridor. They fired their weapons. Frank pushed Susan down and took a glancing hit on his shoulder. His skin burned, but he kept moving. Pete grabbed a fallen Krell weapon and returned fire with surprising accuracy. Go, Frank shouted to the colonists. Get to the shuttle. Back on the Dakota, the rescued colonists hugged their families. Susan treated Frank's wound, which wasn't serious. Pete cleaned the Krell weapon, clearly planning to keep it. Vril sat apart from the humans, still recording. The Concorde must see this, he said quietly. See what? Susan asked. What you did on that ship. Vril voice was filled with awe and fear. 3 humans defeated 6 Krell warriors in direct combat. No species in the Concorde could do that. Frank looked up from his bandaged shoulder. Then maybe the Concorde needs humans more than they realize. News of the rescue spread quickly through Nexus Station. The humans were called to a special meeting of the Concorde Council. Susan could feel the tension as she entered the grand chamber with Frank and Pete. 27 alien representatives sat in a circle. Ambassador Zex Troll spoke first. The Krell ship you boarded has filed a formal complaint. They claim to be legitimate traders who were attacked without warning. Frank stepped forward. They were slave traders who captured our people. We have proof. He played a recording from the Dakota showing the Krell attack. Then he showed footage from Pete's mission camera of the caged humans. The council chamber filled with murmurs and clicks. Some aliens seemed disturbed by the evidence. Others watched the humans with new wariness. A large tentacled alien rose. What concerns us is not just what you did, but how you did it. 3 humans defeated 6 armed Krell through physical combat. We did what was necessary, Pete said simply. The council session lasted hours. When it ended, Susan felt uneasy. The aliens had accepted their evidence, but seemed more concerned about human combat abilities than about the Krell's crimes. Back in their quarters, Lisa Brown had news. "I've been monitoring Concord communications," she said, showing them her datapad. "There's a group called the Preservers who believe humans are too dangerous to join the galactic community." Susan read the secret message. "They want to contain us. Quarantine Earth." Frank wasn't surprised. They're afraid of what they saw. Humans don't just talk about problems. We solve them. That night, Kalir visited Susan. The bird-like alien seemed nervous. "I came to warn you," he said quietly. "The council is divided about humans. Some believe you are too violent to join the Concord." "We only fought to save our people," Susan argued. Kalir's feathers flattened. "You don't understand. Most species in the Concord have evolved beyond physical conflict. They use diplomacy, economics, or technology to resolve problems. And when those fail," Frank asked from the doorway. "They compromise," Kalir admitted. Frank shook his head. "Some things can't be compromised on. Freedom, safety, the lives of our children." The next morning, alarming news arrived from Earth. The Concord had established a blockade around human space, claiming a biological quarantine was needed. Susan confronted Ambassador Zextral. "There is no biological threat. This is about controlling humans." The ambassador's skin shifted to a dark green. "It is for the greater peace of the galaxy." As Susan left the meeting, she found a message from Kalir. "Not all of us agree with this decision. Some of us believe the galaxy needs humans, even if they don't know it yet." The Neptune Research Base was Earth's farthest outpost. 50 scientists and 10 security officers lived there, studying the ice giant's strange storms. They were the first to see the alien ships arrive. Commander Eric Patterson was in the control room when the sensors lit up. 5 Concord vessels appeared near the planet's rings. "They're not responding to hails," said Nancy, his communications officer. Eric frowned. "Wake everyone up. Something's wrong." Before they could prepare, the alien ships fired. Energy beams struck the base's outer sections. Alarms screamed. People ran for emergency suits. "They're targeting our power systems," Eric said, watching the screens. "This isn't a mistake. It's an attack." On Nexus Station, Susan and Frank were planning their escape when they heard about Neptune. Kalir had smuggled them access to Concord battle channels. "The Preservers are making their move," Frank said grimly. "They want to show the galaxy that humans are weak." Susan's hands tightened into fists. They chose the wrong target. At Neptune, Eric gathered his people in the central hub. The outer sections were gone, but the core of the base remained intact. "We have 3 hours of air," he told them. "And we have one advantage. They don't know humans very well." Dr. Helen Rogers, the base's chief scientist, stepped forward. "My team has been working with Neptune's atmospheric gases. We can make explosives from our research materials." Another scientist named Ben held up modified equipment. "And I can convert our scanning tools into electromagnetic pulse devices." Eric nodded. "They expect scientists to surrender. Let's show them what Earth scientists can do." On Nexus, Susan, Frank, and Kalir stole a small ship. As they fled the station, Lisa joined them with vital information. "I found the Preservers' plans," she said. "They're testing us at Neptune. If they win easily, they'll attack Earth next." Frank piloted their ship toward human space. "We need to warn everyone." The battle at Neptune lasted 5 hours. The aliens boarded the station, expecting to find terrified or dead humans. Instead, they found traps, improvised weapons, and researchers who fought with desperate creativity. Eric led his people through maintenance tunnels, striking and disappearing. Helen's chemical explosives disabled alien life support systems. Ben's converted equipment disrupted their communications. When a second wave of human ships arrived from Earth, they found 3 alien vessels destroyed and 2 retreating. The Neptune base was damaged but standing. Most of its people had survived. Across the galaxy, footage from the battle spread quickly. It showed outmatched humans defeating superior forces through determination and improvisation. On her stolen ship, Susan watched the news with mixed feelings. The preservers wanted to show everyone that humans are weak. They proved the opposite. Frank nodded. But now the real war begins. They won't underestimate us again. Kalir looked at his human friends with new understanding. Now I see why your kind evolved on a death world. It made you unstoppable. The final battle took place at Ta City, where the preservers had built their forward base. 40 human ships faced over 100 alien vessels. On paper, it looked like certain defeat for Earth. Admiral Maria Cortez stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the enemy fleet on her screens. Behind her, officers prepared for battle. "They still outnumber us," said her second-in-command. Maria smiled slightly. Numbers aren't everything. The human fleet had been preparing for this moment. Engineers had studied captured alien technology. Pilots had trained for maneuvers that would kill most alien species. Scientists had developed new weapons. As the battle began, Susan and Frank arrived in their stolen ship. They'd brought vital information about preserver weaknesses, gathered from allies like Kalir and other Concord species who had broken ranks to support humans. Lieutenant Joe Ramirez led a small team of soldiers on a daring mission. Their suits allowed them to survive in vacuum for 30 minutes, 3 times longer than any Concord species could manage. They moved through space between ships, attaching devices to enemy vessels. The preservers, confident in their numbers, were shocked when human ships executed tight turns and accelerations that would have killed their own crews. What they didn't know was that humans could withstand forces that would crush most alien bodies. "They're adapting to our weapons," Maria noted as the battle continued. In response, she gave a simple order: begin boarding actions. This was what the preservers feared most: direct combat with humans. Special teams launched from Earth ships, cutting through hulls and entering enemy vessels. The aliens had no defense against humans who could outfight them hand-to-hand. When the preservers deployed biological weapons, they discovered another surprise. Human immune systems, evolved on a planet filled with diseases, proved remarkably resistant. Dr. Ward, monitoring from Earth, broadcast his findings on all channels. Humans evolved on a planet that required us to become apex predators. We developed strength, endurance, immune resistance, and problem-solving that no other species needed for survival. The turning point came when Admiral Cortez herself led the boarding of the preserver flagship. Camera drones captured her team fighting their way to the bridge. Humans moving with a speed and strength that seemed impossible to alien eyes. Across the galaxy, billions watched as Maria confronted the preserver leader. "You can end this now," she said, "or learn exactly why humans survived on our death world." The preservers surrendered. The Battle of Ta City became known as the moment when the galaxy truly understood what humans were. 1 month later, the Concord Council met again. Ambassador Zix Troll, who had once feared humans, now stood to address the assembly. "Today we recognize that the most lethal killers in the galaxy are not our enemies, but our salvation," he said. "Earth will not be quarantined. Instead, we ask humans to help protect all peaceful species. The very traits that make them dangerous make them the perfect defenders." Susan, listening from Earth's new embassy, smiled. Humans had found their place in the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians.